Have you ever felt that inexplicable chill while driving at night? That eerie sensation that you are not alone, even when there's no one else on the road. Some people ignore it. Others aren't so lucky. There are terrifying stories of drivers who encountered something that should never have been there. And we're not talking about animals crossing the road, or objects lying on the asphalt. We're talking about things that don't belong to this world. Think about it. The stranger by the roadside. The night was cold, and the fog covered the road like a ghostly veil. Ricardo, a man used to traveling alone, had been driving for hours along a deserted stretch of highway. The radio crackled, picking up only static, and the clock read 2:43 a.m. That was when he saw it, a motionless silhouette by the roadside, illuminated by the car's headlights. His instinct told him to keep going, but a strange impulse made his fingers touch the brakes. The car slowed down. The figure, a tall, thin man, wore old-fashioned clothes and was barefoot on the freezing asphalt. But the worst part? He wasn't hitchhiking, wasn't moving. He just stared directly at the car with hollow, empty eyes, as if seeing beyond the real world. A shiver ran down Ricardo's spine. He was not a fearful man, but something about that stranger made him grip the steering wheel tighter. The road was completely deserted, no streetlights, no signs of civilization. There was no reason for anyone to be there at that hour. He swallowed hard and pressed the accelerator, deciding to ignore it. But the moment he passed the figure, something unbelievable happened. The stranger turned his head in an impossible way, as if he had no bones in his neck, and followed him with a cold, unwavering stare. Ricardo didn't dare look in the rearview mirror. His heart pounded, and all he wanted was to get away as fast as possible. For a few minutes, the silence in the car was absolute. But then, something worse happened. An unnatural cold filled the cabin. Ricardo felt as if the air had grown denser, heavier. That was when the radio, which had only been emitting static, started playing an old, distorted song, as if coming from a forgotten era. The dashboard screen flickered, and a strong smell of damp earth filled the car. He finally looked into the rearview mirror, and froze. The stranger was sitting in the back seat, smiling at him. The truck driver and the woman on the shoulder. The silence of the road was broken only by the rumble of the engine. Jonas, an experienced truck driver, was used to driving through the night, but something felt different that evening. The dense fog reduced visibility, and the only thing lighting the way was the truck's powerful headlights. That was when he saw her, a woman walking alone along the roadside, dressed in a long white dress, stained with dust. Jonas didn't think twice before downshifting. It was dangerous for someone to be out there at that hour. As he approached, he rolled down the window and asked if she needed help. The woman didn't respond. She simply raised her hand and pointed forward, as if signaling that she wanted a ride. Despite feeling a strange chill run through his body, Jonas couldn't just leave her there. He unlocked the door, and the woman got in, sitting beside him without saying a word. The silence inside the cabin was suffocating. He tried to make conversation, asked where she was headed, but the woman remained motionless, staring straight at the road. The scent of damp earth and withered flowers filled the air. Jonas's discomfort grew, and his instincts told him not to look directly at her. But then, for just a brief second, he glanced at the rearview mirror, and what he saw made his blood run cold. The woman had no reflection. His heart pounded. He blinked, trying to convince himself it was a mistake, a trick of the light, but the mirror remained empty. The woman was still beside him, yet it was as if she didn't exist. Fear started creeping in, and he decided to stop at the next gas station. But when he turned to the passenger seat to speak to her, she was gone. The seat was empty, with no sign that anyone had been there just seconds before. The only thing left behind was a neatly folded white handkerchief on the seat, embroidered with a name, Beatriz, 1972. The problem? That very road had been the scene of a fatal accident in that exact year. The abandoned gas station that shouldn't exist. Lucas and Raphael had been traveling together for hours. The clock had already passed 3 in the morning, and the road seemed endless. Fatigue was setting in, their eyes were heavy, and the fuel gauge needle was dangerously close to empty. That was when they spotted a small gas station up ahead. The lights were dim, flickering from time to time, and the sign was old, nearly illegible. But in their situation, they had no choice. They pulled up beside the only visible fuel pump and got out of the car, feeling the cold, heavy air that surrounded the place. Something was wrong, but neither of them could pinpoint exactly what. A gas station attendant slowly emerged from inside the convenience store. He wore a dirty, faded uniform, and his face was partially hidden beneath a cap. His skin was pale, and his eyes seemed hollow. In a hoarse voice, he asked, "How much do you need?" Raphael felt an inexplicable chill, but Lucas, more pragmatic, answered that they would fill up the tank. While the attendant worked, the two decided to go inside the store to grab something to eat. Inside, they found dusty shelves and old products with faded packaging, as if they had been sitting there for decades. When they reached the register to pay, the cashier just stared at them, unblinking. "We only take cash here," he muttered. Lucas pulled out some bills from his wallet and placed them on the counter. That was when he noticed. His money was moldy, as if it had been buried for years. Their hearts pounded. Without saying a word, they rushed out of the store, jumped into the car, and sped away, not daring to look in the rearview mirror. Fear coursed through their veins. 20 minutes later, they arrived at a small village and asked a local about the gas station. The old man furrowed his brow and calmly replied, "Son, that station burned down over 30 years ago. The attendant died inside. You must be mistaken. Roads carry stories. Thousands of people have traveled them. Some never reached their destination. Accidents, disappearances, unsolved mysteries. But what if certain places held onto the energy of those who met a tragic end? And worse, what if some of them are still out there, waiting for a ride?" Today, you'll hear 7 real and disturbing stories of people who encountered the impossible on the road. Warning: after this video, your nighttime drives will never be the same. The child in the middle of the road. Marcelo was driving alone down a secondary road, trying to take a shortcut to get home faster. The GPS directed him through a rarely traveled route, surrounded by towering trees, where the only light came from his car's headlights. The absolute silence gave him an eerie feeling, as if the world around him had stopped. Then, in the distance, he saw a small silhouette standing in the middle of the road. His heart pounded. It was a child. The child looked about 6 years old, dressed in an old-fashioned pajama, holding something in their hands. Marcelo's instincts kicked in. He slammed on the brakes. A chill ran through his body as he realized the child wasn't moving, wasn't reacting to the headlights approaching. Slowly, he got out of the car, his voice trembling as he called out. No response. The air felt heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and something rotten. Marcelo took a few more cautious steps, and when he was close enough to see the child's face, an indescribable terror gripped him. Something was wrong. Their features were distorted, as if reflected in shattered glass. Their eyes were black hollow, and their mouth was slightly open, silent, unmoving. His body froze. Then, without warning, the child dropped what they were holding, a filthy old teddy bear, and took a step forward. Marcelo's instincts screamed at him to run. He spun around, bolted back to the car, locked the doors, and started the engine with trembling hands. When he glanced at the road again, the child was gone. His chest heaved, adrenaline surging through his veins. He took a deep breath and floored the gas pedal, desperate to leave that place behind. But then, he felt something behind him. The air turned ice cold, and a shiver crawled up his spine. Marcelo slowly looked into the rearview mirror, and nearly passed out from fear. The child was sitting in the back seat, staring directly at him, wearing a smile he would never forget. The ghost bus that never reaches its destination. It was past midnight when Eduardo arrived at the bus stop. The cold wind howled through the empty streets, and not a soul was in sight. He had missed the last regular bus and, without money for a taxi, had no choice but to wait. After a few minutes, a pair of headlights pierced through the darkness, appearing out of nowhere. A bus, old but well-preserved, pulled up with an unlit sign. Eduardo climbed the steps and was met with the damp, musty scent of mold. The driver, a pale man with a vacant expression, stared at him silently as he dropped his coins into the fare box. The bus was nearly full, but the atmosphere was eerily quiet. Every passenger sat motionless, staring straight ahead. Eduardo tried to ignore the unsettling stillness, choosing a seat and settling in. But as the minutes passed, an overwhelming sense of unease crept over him. The silence was suffocating. No one moved. No one blinked. His discomfort grew when he noticed that the interior lights of the bus didn't flicker with the bumps in the road. It was as if they weren't actually moving. Panic surged through him when his eyes darted to the driver's dashboard. What he saw made his blood run cold. The speedometer read 0. His heart pounded. The bus was moving, yet it wasn't going anywhere. He turned to the elderly man seated beside him, hoping to start a conversation. No response. That's when he realized, the man wasn't breathing. Eduardo shot up from his seat, his chest tightening with terror. He ran to the driver, shouting for him to stop the bus. Slowly, the driver turned his head and in a hollow, rasping voice, said, "No one leaves here." Eduardo's blood froze. He lunged for the emergency door, but before he could react, everything went black. The next morning, his body was found at an abandoned bus stop miles away. Clutching an old, faded ticket in his hand, dated 1974, the greeting of the faceless man. The group of friends was in high spirits, heading to a remote countryside retreat. Laughter and idle chatter filled the car, but the dark, winding road cast an unsettling atmosphere. Only the headlights illuminated the way, and the GPS showed another 30 minutes to their destination. Then, as they rounded a curve, they saw a man standing by the roadside, slowly waving. He wore simple clothes, looking like just another hitchhiker. At first, no one paid much attention. "Just another guy asking for a ride," one of the friends muttered. But as they passed him, something impossible happened. The man had no face. A suffocating silence filled the car. No one dared to speak for the first few seconds. Did they all see the same thing? The driver, gripping the wheel with trembling hands, tried to convince himself it was just a trick of the light. But before they could fully process what had happened, another curve revealed something that made their blood run cold. The same man was there again, standing by the shoulder, waving ***. That was impossible. They had not passed any turnoffs or side roads. How could he be there again? Panic gripped the group, and the driver pressed the accelerator. The next few minutes were filled with unbearable tension. The car sped down the narrow road, and no one dared to look outside. But then, one of the friends in the back seat let out a choked scream. The driver glanced at the rearview mirror, and nearly lost control of the car. The faceless man was sitting in the back seat, right between them. The car veered off the road and rolled multiple times before finally coming to a stop. When the rescue team arrived, they found the friends in a state of shock. But one thing was never explained. One of the passengers swore that, just before losing consciousness, he saw the faceless man calmly step out of the wreck and walk into the darkness of the forest, as if nothing had happened. The parking lot that takes you somewhere else. Andre was exhausted after driving for hours. Sleep was creeping in, and he decided to stop at the first parking lot he could find by the roadside. It was a small, empty gas station, with no other cars in sight. The place looked old, but still functional. He parked near one of the dim streetlights, turned off the engine, and reclined his seat to rest for a bit. The silence was absolute, broken only by the distant sound of crickets. He closed his eyes for a few minutes, or so he thought. When he opened them again, the world around him had changed. The gas station was gone. In its place, there was only an empty, dark lot, overgrown with weeds. The air felt thick, heavy with the acrid scent of something burnt. He looked around, searching for any sign of the road or the highway lights, but everything seemed wrong. The sky had a strange hue, as if stuck in an eternal twilight, and the distant trees appeared distorted, reshaped into something unnatural. Panicking, he grabbed his phone to check his location, but the GPS couldn't find his position. His breathing grew rapid. Desperation took over as he hastily started the car and sped away, driving aimlessly down a road that seemed to stretch on forever. After what felt like hours, he spotted lights in the distance and rushed toward them. Relief washed over him as he finally reached a busy road. But when he stopped to ask a gas station attendant about the place where he had parked, the response made his blood run cold. There's never been a gas station there. That lot has been abandoned for over 40 years. They say it burned down, and no one ever figured out why.